Welcome back to another episode of Real Railroads. This is one being episode 7, forming the New York Central. The New York Central system is well known for its gray lightning stripe with white accents on black and its major artery across New York State, the water level route, along with its line down the Hudson River to New York City and Grand Central Station. But it started in 1826 with the first permanent railroad to be built in New York. This was the Mohawk and Hudson Railroad, chartered in April 17, 1826. It was designed to connect the Mohawk River in Schenectady to the Hudson River in Albany and bypass the locks on the Erie Canal, which were time-consuming. It only ran 16 miles through Pine Bush, the area between Schenectady and Albany. It was built out of stone blocks with strap rail resting on them and didn't enter either city due to steep grades and passengers covered the last bit on stagecoaches until an inclined plane with a fixed steam engine was built at each end. This railroad is the one that the DeWitt Clinton made its first run on July 2, 1831, before the railroad officially opened. That happened on September 24th that same year. The railroad changed its name to the Albany and Schenectady Railroad on April 19, 1847, and was consolidated into the New York Central Railroad on May 17, 1853. The second railroad that became the NYC was the Utica and Schenectady Railroad. This was chartered on April 29, 1833, to compete with the Erie Canal. However, it was forbidden to haul freight until May 7, 1844, when it could, with some restrictions, and then was fully permitted to carry freight on May 12, 1847, though it had to pay canal tolls to the state for all freight hauled. It operated from August 2, 1836, until it was consolidated in the New York Central on May 17, 1853. This extended rail service from the Hudson River roughly 96 miles through the Adirondacks to Utica, New York. The trackage west to Rochester was 3 railroads. One was the Auburn and Syracuse Railroad, which this was chartered on May 1, 1834, to build the 26 miles between those two cities. This left a gap in rail service, a 55-mile gap, between Syracuse and Utica. This was filled by the Syracuse and Utica Railroad's May 1, 1836 charter to fill those 55 miles, but this took the longer route, paralleling the canal to reach Rome. The Auburn and Rochester Railroad, chartered on May 13, 1836, was to reach Rochester via Canandaigua, a route of roughly 63 miles. These opened in the same order they were chartered. The A&S on June 4, 1839, the S&U on July 3, 1839, and the A&R on November 4, 1841. On August 1, 1850, the Auburn and Syracuse and Auburn and Rochester merged to form the Rochester and Syracuse Railroad. This made a long route along the tops of the Finger Lakes through Auburn, Geneva, and Canandaigua, then northwest to Rochester, ending at the Genesee River. This long route didn't really compete with the Erie Canal. This resulted in the Rochester and Syracuse Direct Railway being chartered in August 1850 and merged into the Rochester and Syracuse on August 6, 1850. That line, which became part of the NYC water level route along with the Syracuse and Utica, Utica and Schenectady, and Albany and Schenectady, was opened on June 1, 1853. The longer route became known as the Auburn Road, and today the segment from Syracuse to Canandaigua is operated by the Finger Lakes Railway, with a section from Syracuse to Geneva seeing the most traffic. The part to Canandaigua is used as needed. The Genesee River in Rochester proved an obstacle for many years, but railroads were built west of it. With a goal to reach Buffalo, the Tonawanda Railroad was chartered on April 24, 1832, to build southwest from Rochester to Utica, New York. They built on the route that became the water level route to Batavia, then turned almost due south to reach Utica. Service opened between Batavia and Rochester on May 5, 1837, and was extended south to Utica on January 4, 1843. This linked with the Utica and Buffalo Railroad, which had opened between those two places on November 24, 1842. The Utica and Buffalo and the Tonawanda Railroads merged to form the Buffalo and Rochester Railroad on December 7, 1850. This formed an all-rail route across the state from Albany to Buffalo. The missing link in Rochester had been made in 1844, when the Tonawanda Railroad completed a bridge across the Genesee River connecting the Tonawanda Railroad to the Auburn and Rochester Railroad. The route via Utica was also the long route. Like the Auburn Road, it went too far south for their preference. Thus, the Buffalo-Rochester Railroad opened a direct route east from Batavia directly to Buffalo via Corfu and Akron on April 26, 1852. The section between Buffalo and Utica was then sold to the New York and Erie Railroad and converted to 6-foot broad gauge. The NYC kept the track from Batavia to Utica for a long time, though, keeping an interchange with the Erie Railroad there and what became the Arcade in Utica. It ran parallel to Erie's own line to Batavia, which lasted longer than the Central's line. When the Central formed in 1853, it not only obtained a water-level route and Auburn Road, but other lines as well. These were Schenectady and Troy Railroad, the Rochester, Lockport, and Niagara Falls Railroad, the Buffalo and Lockport Railroad, the Mohawk Valley Railroad, and the Utica and the Syracuse and Utica Direct Railroad. The S&T, which opened in 1842, linked the Mohawk and Hudson Rivers between its namesake communities. The RL&NF opened in 1838 as the Lockport and Niagara Falls, linking those two. It was reorganized on December 14, 1850 as the RL&NF, with the extension to Rochester on July 1, 1852. The section from Lockport to Brockport is now operated by Genesee Valley Transportation subsidiary Falls Road Railroad. A short section in Rochester is an industrial spur, and from Lockport west to the Niagara Falls area is owned and operated by CSX. The B&L opened in 1854 after the merger, reaching from the RL&NF to Tonawanda and Erie County. This provided a shortcut connecting the RL and NF with the Buffalo and Niagara Falls Railroad that had been open since 1837. The Mohawk Valley was supposed to build on the south side of the Mohawk River along the Erie Canal across from the UNS, but the merger happened before construction started and it was never built. The West Shore Railroad would use that plan right away later. The last also was never built. This was the Syracuse and Utica Direct Railroad that would have reduced time between Utica and Syracuse by half an hour, but like the Mohawk Valley, the line wasn't built before the merger. The West Shore Railroad had been built from Weehawken, New Jersey, north to Albany and west in a very direct route to Buffalo. It was supposed to be competition for Vanderbilt's New York Central and Hudson River Railroad, but it would be taken over by its competition. It, like the New York Central, was formed from smaller railroads, but along the Hudson River's west shore, hence its name. It had built a railroad that linked the tri-state area with upstate New York and then ran west to Buffalo, with trackage rights over the suspension bridge, the Erie Junction Railroad and Erie International Railroad. The West Shore, then called the New York West Shore in Buffalo, linked New York City and Ontario, Canada. The Central bought the NYWS&B on November 24, 1885, and reorganized it to become the West Shore Railroad on December 5, 1885. On January 1, 1886, the Central leased the West Shore for 475 years. The West Shore, being a more direct route, was used heavily by the Central. They had a few stations with grand architecture. Today, what remains of the West Shore Railroad is owned by CSX. The line along the Hudson, now the CSX River Subdivision, running between North Bergen Yard and New York, New Jersey to Selkirk Yard in Schenectady area. Another section of the West Shore is used as a bypass of Rochester, running from Fairport through Pittsford and Henrietta, passing through Mortimer Junction, where it meets the L&L's former Erie and Lehigh Valley lines, crosses the Genesee River and the former Genesee Valley Canal before reaching Genesee Junction, where it meets the Rochester and Southern at the south end of the Rochester Airport in Chi-Li. That's, of course, taken in Silver Springs, but it's Rochester and Southern. Links right in. Perfect time for that photo to come up. The West Shore joins back up with the CSX Rochester subdivision near North Chi-Li. This section of the West Shore serves the route trains away from Goodman Street Yard, which is a classification yard in Rochester. Any train that does not stop at that yard is likely to take the West Shore. However, the line is single track, therefore only one train can occupy it at a time. Some other pieces were the Lewiston Railroad, which had opened in 1837, running from Niagara Falls north to Lewiston, New York, and merged in the New York Central in 1855. Another was the Canandaigua and Niagara Falls Railroad, which merged in the NYC in 1890 after being bought and reorganized by NYC in 1858. This ran from Canandaigua to Batavia Batavia, not Batavia. Originally, but was extended to North Tonawanda in 1854. This line of the NYC was known as the Peanut Line and was mentioned in the video on the G&W. The Hudson River Line had been Vanderbilt's first railroad and was merged with the NYC on November 1st, 1869. The Geneva Lions built from Lyons on the Waterloo route south to the Auburn Road in Geneva. This line was merged into Central in 1890 and today is in mothballs under the Finger Lakes Railway, which primarily interchanges with CSX and Solvay outside Syracuse. This concludes the beginnings of New York Central, a railroad steeped in history that became a massive empire in the northeast United States. It operated not only one route across New York, but 5 different routes, some involving parts of another, but served different parts of upstate New York not far from each other. Next week, I will be covering a local short line that I have recorded many times. That one. And that video will be recorded after this one. Stay tuned for next week.